Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed at 1,000 subscribers. I'll be posting a special video. The key fob died at his building door, 3 red flashes, then silence. I pressed again and heard the lock clack without opening. Footsteps in the stairwell paused, then retreated fast. Mara, 28, I whispered to the metal like a dare. Someone upstairs watched the lobby camera and waited me out. I called his phone straight to voicemail on the first ring. The concierge checked a screen and shrugged once. Your access was removed this morning, eyes back to the monitor. My gut tightened and went cold in a hard wave. I waited in the vestibule, counting breaths that kept snagging. He finally came down with a gym bag, zipper half open. You should have texted first. He bumped the door with his shoulder. You revoked my fob. I held it up like evidence. System update, he said, already turning toward the elevator. I slid in after him before the doors closed, too close to smile. The elevator lurched and hummed and climbed. He watched the floor numbers like they mattered. Who authorized the update? My voice sounded steadier than I felt. He rolled his wrist like it hurt and met my eyes. Let it go for now, he said, breath even but clipped. On his floor, my name vanished from the door intercom. Just a blank line where I used to be. Quick fix, he muttered and palmed the keypad. The chime sounded bright and wrong and distant. I stepped inside and clocked nothing I could trust yet. His phone buzzed on the counter and lit up twice. My contact photo was gone, replaced by gray initials. I reached toward it and he slid it away. Battery saver, he said, eyes on the sink. My throat burned and I swallowed the first response. Show me your focus modes. I kept my tone level. He laughed once and opened settings without hesitation. A list appeared: work, sleep, clean, quiet, each with exclusions. My name sat outside all of them like a stray. He flicked the screen and the list vanished. Neat little magic. I moved to the fridge and pulled the whiteboard magnet. Under it, a paper with times and initials I did not know. Not our usual shorthand, new rules I never learned. What are these? I held it where he had to look. Deliveries, he said, wrapping the word like it could hide. The oven timer beeped though the oven was cold. He tapped the button until the room went still. Your calendar invites disappeared last week, I said. He tightened the gym bag strap and tested the door. We should reset everything, he said, voice too calm for this. I stood between him and the exit and waited. Did I do something? The question felt risky and small. He rubbed his jaw and stared past me at nothing. You fill the air, he said, like reading a diagnosis. What are you trying to remove? I asked, me or the air. The hallway outside filled with cartwheels and chatter. He leaned against the frame and lowered his voice. I sleep better without pings and pop-ups and mess. You mean without me? I said, and the word landed heavy. He looked almost relieved, as if I named the switch. I pocketed the dead fob and stepped back once. Then say it clean, I said, every word slow for control. He opened his mouth and closed it like something snapped. Not yet, a breath, I am testing. My chest went hollow. Experiments use subjects before results, right? The gym bag hit his shoulder and he moved past. Dinner later, he added like this was normal. Text me, I said, and watched his grip tighten. You will see it when you see it. The door shut and the lock clicked twice, once for him, once for me. I jabbed the rideshare pin and watched his icon vanish. Find My Friends showed a gray dot that blurred and slid. Sharing ended for him at 6 a.m. with a neat banner. I stood on the sidewalk and felt my root collapse. Who turns off visibility right before breakfast on purpose? At the office door, my badge flashed green, then red. Security glanced up and frowned like I was a problem. Try again, my hand shook and missed the reader. Your partner removed you from the guest list, he murmured. Guest, that word stung like a cheap label I never chose. I sat in a meeting room and pulled up our notes. Ownership now read private with a padlock and his email. A pop-up asked to request access from the administrator. I typed please in lowercase and deleted it twice. I hit send and waited for mercy that did not come. My phone buzzed, bank alert for a changed contact. His name replaced mine on 2 joint notifications. I called support and verified codes with steady breathing. Who requested the swap? I asked, keeping my voice even. Primary account holder online, the agent replied, unfazed and quick. At lunch, I reached for the streaming profile out of habit. Our shared avatar was wiped to an empty square. The watch history displayed none of my pics or timelines. A new profile sat there with a single letter. I stared until the screen dimmed like it wanted me gone. I walked to his gym and scanned the lobby bow. Ard. Members list showed his nickname and a star icon. Next to it, an unfamiliar emergency contact replaced me quietly. The attendant chewed gum and tapped the desk edge. Forms were updated today, she said, fingers drumming in time. I texted a simple question, are you safe right now? Bubbles appeared, stalled, then broke into a short reply. At work, then nothing for 10 long minutes. Talk tonight, his next line read without a smile. My pulse kicked hard because tonight rarely means clarity. Home again, I tried our building app for the elevator. My device was marked inactive with a crisp timestamp. I added a new login and watched it reject me. I filmed the error and saved it to a hidden folder. Evidence felt pathetic, yet I needed a trail that could not vanish. Inside my place, the speaker ignored my voice command. A different user profile answered with a flat greeting. Switch to Mara, I tried again with a careful tone. Profile not found, the system answered after a brief hum. Even the house had learned a new way to forget me. I opened the group chat with his friends to check plans. I scrolled and found a second thread without my name. They were active there with fresh jokes and winks. In hours, they posted once a day like a courtesy. Split channels, one for performances, one for the real talk. I called his sister from the hallway and braced. He is fine, she said before hello even landed. You spoke to him, I asked and leaned on the wall. He wants fewer inputs this month, her voice dropped. So I am noise again, I said, softer than I meant. Evening crawled in and I set the phone down. I printed the changed settings and clipped them in order. I hated the ritual, yet it kept my head straight. Tonight he promised a conversation and I would not flinch. If he was rehearsing a disappearance, I would catch the seams. He arrived late and keyed in without looking at me. He washed his hands too long like time could stretch. Why did the location share stop? I asked immediately. He reached for a glass and kept his eyes low. Boundaries, the word fell between us like a locked door. Whose number is on the emergency forms now? He wiped a drop from the counter and shrugged lightly. A colleague, he drew out the last syllable slowly. Why not me? I stepped closer and blocked the drawer. You escalate, he said, and a faint smile twitched. I escalate when facts change without warning. I laid the bank alert on the table with care. I also escalate when I become a guest everywhere. He flicked the paper away with the back of his hand. We need quiet, he answered, and my chest tightened hard. Quiet or distance? I asked, not blinking once. He looked toward the door like he could hear footsteps. I am trying something cleaner, he whispered after a beat. Cleaner like less mess or cleaner like no witness? His jaw flexed and eased as if that hit a nerve. He pulled out his phone and tapped through shortcuts. He showed a screen labeled safe mode with toggles. Under it, a list of exclusions that did not include me. He held the display steady so I would really see it. This is temporary, he said, though his posture told another story. Then switch it off now. I crossed my arms and waited. His thumb hovered over the slider and stopped short. You will flood me with questions, he answered quietly. I am asking one at a time, I countered without moving. A long silence stretched until my pulse counted to 40. He locked the phone and placed it face down. Dinner, he offered, as if we could pivot to normal. No, I said, which surprised even me with its weight. Undo one thing tonight, I added with a level stare. If you will not, I will assume this experiment is final. He leaned back and studied the ceiling like it held advice. The seconds beat hard and I felt my resolve settle. Location sharing only, he said, fingers unclenching slowly. He toggled it on and waited for my screen to confirm. A ping returned and it felt like a borrowed life raft. I watched the map populate and measured the concession. 1 step given, 10 still locked behind his quiet system. My hands steadied on the table edge and I nodded. Tomorrow I expect 2 more reversals, I told him clearly. His eyes cooled and I knew tomorrow would draw blood. I woke to a chime and no banner, alerts were throttled. Location still pulsed, then shifted across town in one jump. The path skipped streets like a cut reel. He was moving without traces, just coordinates and gaps. I dressed fast and followed the map anyway, because stalling feeds doubt. At the courthouse steps my phone buzzed twice. A verification request flashed for an account I did not open. New primary email ending with his initials, approve or deny. I hit deny and breathed through the spike. If he was rerouting identity, I was already late. I walked straight to the clerk and asked for records. She tapped keys and raised an eyebrow once. Contact changes filed for utilities, she read without looking up. Different payer, different forwarding address, effective tomorrow. My name sat there but faint like soon-to-be dust. I called the service line and held while music looped. List the authorized user, I kept my tone steady. A stranger's name sat above mine with a fresh timestamp. Remove them, I said, palm flat on the counter. We need confirmation from primary, the agent answered, clipped and final. I texted him 2 more reversals now. Dots appeared, paused, then occurred answer. Not during work, landed like a locked door. Then I escalate during work, I replied, thumb firm. Silence pressed, then the map nudged 3 blocks east. I headed to his building and queued for visitor passes. The receptionist scanned the screen and frowned hard. You're on a restricted list, her voice turned careful. Is this about safety? I asked, jaw tight. She slid me a pamphlet for conflict policies, message received. Outside, a delivery driver called his name into the air. I stepped closer and watched the handoff happen fast. A small box signed with a flourish that wasn't his. New handwriting, brisk and practiced, like this wasn't new. I photographed the label because my memory needed allies. Back home, my insurance portal locked me out. Security questions had been rewritten with answers I wouldn't pick. I used the backup code I saved weeks earlier. Inside, beneficiaries showed a loan entry that was not me. A lump hit my throat, but anger steadied the hand that clicked restore. He texted, stop digging. I sent a screenshot of the policy page and waited. 3 minutes, then a single word arrived. Temporary, then the typing bubble broke apart. Temporary keeps bleeding into permanent when no one watches, right? I grabbed a rideshare to our storage unit. The gate code rejected me until the 3rd try. Inside, 2 bins were missing from the back row. An empty dust rectangle gave them away like chalk outlines. I checked the log and saw an entry at dawn, authorized. He called as I stepped into the corridor. Leave the unit alone, his voice came low and flat. You packed what? I asked, ear pressed to my shoulder. He exhaled, then shifted to a tone I hadn't heard. Items that complicate the unwind, he said, and my stomach flipped. I reached the lease office and asked about signers. The manager pulled up our record and pursed her lips. A change request is pending for next month. I kept my face calm while my pulse hammered. Notify me if anything moves, I said, and met within minutes. My phone rang, unknown number with a city code. HR from his company, a voice announced briskly. Confirm emergency contact for travel forms. They read a name that wasn't family or me. I wrote it down because patterns matter when you are erased. He texted again, we can talk at 9. I replied, you rescind 2 changes now. A minute ticked, then another, then nothing. I booked a notary for the evening anyway. If he wanted clean lines, I could draw them too. At 9 he arrived with clipped steps and a neutral face. Choose, I started, palms open on the table. Undo the unit access or restore insurance roles. He stared at the chair back like it might argue. Insurance, he finally said, voice barely above the hum. Do it, I slid the tablet across without ceremony. He logged in and hovered over the toggle. There are reasons, he tried, but the rest died. Actions, I answered and cocked my head once. He switched it back and the green check marked home. One more, I pushed while resolve still burned. Add me to the travel forms before midnight. His jaw tensed and loosened like a quiet tell. I will add you as secondary, he replied after a beat. Primary, I said, and didn't blink until he looked away. He tapped the field and typed with jerky focus. A confirmation pinged my phone 3 seconds later. Primary contact reinstated, timestamped, verifiable, clean. I felt my breath smooth out for the first time today. Control tastes thin, but it keeps your hands from shaking. He reached for the door, then paused like weighing penalties. I am still testing, he murmured toward the frame. No, I said, and the word landed like a lock. Tests end when people bleed, I added without raising volume. He left anyway, and the hallway swallowed the echo like a trap. I spent the next hour building a list with teeth. Carrier pin set, bank alerts mirrored, device backups forced. Shared accounts checked and patched with fresh codes. Everything printed and sealed because screens can lie. I would not wait for kindness from someone sharpening scissors. The buzzer rattled before sunrise, and I signed for an envelope. Account closure forms with my name printed wrong on purpose. Return address traced to a mailbox I never used. I stared at the signature line and grabbed a pen. I wrote 3 words across I. T in block letters, do not close. At the branch, I pushed the envelope through the slot. Flag my profile for attempted takeover, I told the clerk. She clicked fast and asked for a safe word. I gave one I would never forget under pressure. She nodded once and marked the screen with a red bar, finally wait. My phone flashed an authentication prompt from an unrecognized device. Approve or deny sat there like a dare with teeth. I hit deny twice and the third prompt threatened lockout. I dug out the hardware key and forced a reset. A message arrived seconds later, stop breaking things short and smug. I rode across town to the postal station without breathing. A forwarding request had been placed for my mail. New address listed a suite number I did not know. Cancel and restrict future changes without in-person verification, I said. The clerk stamped it hard, then looked me over for resolve. The map showed his location inside a co-working building. Front desk scanned my ID and shook her head once. You're not cleared, she murmured while flipping a clipboard. I waited by the exit and watched the turnstiles. He walked out with a woman who touched his elbow. 2 minutes, I called, stepping into their path cleanly. The woman stopped and lowered her hand from his sleeve. This is a hallway, she said with a thin smile. Then you can keep walking, I answered without looking at her. He adjusted his watch and finally met my eyes, measured and distant. Choose a fix now, I said, voice flat and steady. Stop the mail, move, or restore shared utilities today. He shifted his weight and glanced toward the lobby cameras. I'm optimizing stress, he replied with that polished calm. You're deleting a person, I said, and his jaw ticked. He motioned for space and I stayed in place. Legal options are available, I reminded him with care. Return access and we walk away clean tonight. He flicked his gaze to the exit and back once. This is not a negotiation, he whispered, then turned on his heel. I walked 3 blocks and opened my notes with purpose. Credit frozen at all bureaus with a new passphrase. Carrier locked with a verbal code and a PIN. Backups burned to an offline drive I could touch. A notary stamped my timeline with dates that hold. He texted an hour later, moving out in stages. No stages, I typed, each letter deliberate and slow. I emailed the landlord a formal notice with screenshots. Subject line read documentation of unilateral changes to access. To him I wrote one line, all transfers happen with witnesses. My calendar emptied in a rush like a trapdoor. A cascade of cancellations rolled through my screen with stamps. I took photos of each before they disappeared forever. Then I called Elena and asked her to be present. She arrived fast and slipped her phone to record on silent. He buzzed at 8 and stepped in like a contractor. List, I said, and slid the printed sheet across. He moved through rooms and reached for a framed keepsake. Not leaving with you, I said, hand on the frame. He paused, then tucked a smaller item into his coat. Pocket, I said, and held out my palm without blinking. He hesitated, then set the item down with care. Essentials only, I repeated, and Elena wrote the time. He scanned the table like it might argue on his behalf. A muscle near his temple jumped, tiny but loud. You planned this for weeks, I said, not as a question. He straightened but did not argue or soften. I needed a clean conclusion, he offered after 3 beats. Clean for who? I asked, and the room held its breath. He looked at the door like it could bless his exit. You could have told me you were leaving, I said. You would have convinced me to stay, he answered quickly. You are right, I said, and the truth tasted sharp. That is why you do not get to pilot this ending. He stared at the checklist like it might rewrite itself. Keys clinked on the counter, and he slid his set over. Thank you, I said, keeping my tone even and cold. He tapped his phone and the shared photo frame flashed. Images vanished one by one until the glass went blank. He lifted the bag and walked out without checking back. The lock clicked and my chest shook once, then steadied. Elena squeezed my shoulder and opened her notes for review. We cataloged the remaining logins and set new phrases. Everything double-checked and stored where fingers cannot wander. If he tried one more silent cut, I would be waiting. The carrier flagged my SIM at noon, suspicious replacement request pending. I ran to the storefront and flashed my ID hard. Lock my number with an in-person only note. The clerk typed fast and raised a hand for silence. A second request pinged the screen while we watched, almost live. I stepped outside and my signal dipped to 1 bar. Backup phone lit up with a code from my bank. Someone tried to reset with a new device fingerprint. I forwarded the alert to my attorney contact immediately. Whoever pushed that button was close and careless. His location blinked near a cafe 2 blocks east. I walked straight there and ordered water without sitting. He stood at the back with the same woman. They spoke in low tones with heads tilted inward. I lifted my phone and snapped one clear photo proof. He noticed and pocketed his hands like holding court. Stop shadowing me, drifted across the room without volume. Return my access, I answered, shoulder against the wall. The woman reached for her tote and slid away. He remained planted like gravity picked sides today. You filed mail forwarding again, I said without blinking. He lifted one eyebrow and almost smiled at the ceiling. Prove it, he murmured, eyes back on my phone. I showed the stamp cancellation with today's time. His mouth tightened then relaxed like a rehearsed tick. A message pinged my screen from the landlord portal. Unauthorized signer removed at request of tenant. I opened the thread and hit reply with 2 lines. Confirm no changes without both approvals. The manager sent back one word, confirmed, followed by an audit log. He leaned closer and lowered his chin to level mine. You are escalating again, floated out like a diagnosis. I am documenting, I said, keeping shoulders square. Different verb, new posture, he answered with a thin grin. Control was sport for him, but my patience had claws. I texted the group chat with a short statement. We are separating and logistics are in process. Within minutes, a newer thread lit up elsewhere. Screenshots surfaced with a caption that painted me unstable. Friends split into watchers and whisperers, exactly his arrangement. I posted our timeline to a private archive with hashes. Every event stamped and cross-checked for later. Elena reviewed the folder and nodded once at the order. If he flips the script, this beats memory, she said. I felt my breath steady because facts can anchor action. HR emailed to verify travel contacts again. I called the number and requested their policy in writing. They confirmed my role with a dry disclaimer. Any future edits require consent from all parties. He had tried to backchannel and hit a locked door. In the afternoon, a patrol car stopped at my building. An officer asked for a wellness confirmation with measured tone. Who requested the check? I asked while keeping hands visible. He read a name that matched the woman from the cafe. Weaponizing concern, cute trick tightened my jaw. I invited them in and showed the binder with dates. Vital signs normal, no threats, safe to close the call. They left with a signature and a card for follow-up. I photographed the report number before the door latched. If he wanted a paper trail, he just gifted one. He texted after dark, return the keepsake from the unit. I responded, inventory first with a third-party present. Just leave it at the desk, he urged without detail. Not without receipt, I wrote, thumb steady on send. People who cut corners hate countersign slips always. At 7 sharp he arrived with a bland mediator. Ground rules, the mediator began with palms open. No surprises, no accusations, only items and accounts. I slid my phone forward and pressed play on a clip. His voice from yesterday filled the room. I needed no witnesses. He froze for half a second, then smoothed his face. The mediator's pen hovered above the pad and waited. Context, he started, then caught himself and swallowed it. I tapped the screen to pause at his own words. Items and accounts, I echoed, inviting him to proceed under oath. We listed possessions with serials and sign-off lines. Every transfer required a timestamp and a signature. He pushed to move 3 things with no record. I pointed at the recorder and kept my mouth shut. He backed down with a shallow breath and a stare. When the list ended, I asked for 2 digital corrections. Restore my email to the utilities, rescind the third-party access. He hovered over the fields like they stung. The mediator cleared his throat and folded his hands. Update saved, and my phone chimed with matching alerts. One last item, I added with my voice level. Send a statement to the friend threads right now. He blinked hard and reached for the keyboard slowly. He typed 8 words that actually mattered to me. Mara manages her accounts, stop contacting me for gossip. He stood, then looked straight at the recorder once. I am done here, he announced to the carpet. Not yet, I countered with a small nod to the mediator. Keys to the storage lock and the spare fob. He produced both like they were nothing, but his jaw trembled. Outside the door he paused and faced the hallway. You will never forgive me, drifted out like a fact. That is not your assignment, I answered without heat. Return anything you find in your pockets by morning. He walked off without turning. Which told me morning would bite. A courier dropped a small parcel with no return stamp. Inside lay my spare fob and a folded cashier slip. The note read, final handoff tonight, rooftop 9. I texted Elena our plan and packed the recorder. If he staged drama above ground, I would script my exit. At 8:50 I climbed the last stairs and paused. Wind shoved hair into my mouth and sharpened my focus. He waited by the edge with a flat expression. A backpack hung from one shoulder like he might bolt. Last exchange, I said, and kept distance between us. He placed a pouch on the bench and nudged it. Everything remaining, he offered, voice low and even. On camera, I answered, tapping the recorder twice. He nodded once and kept his eyes on the skyline. We both knew the skyline did not care who vanished. I need one statement before we close this, I said. You removed my access intentionally, not for maintenance. He inhaled and rolled his shoulders like loosening a knot. I removed friction, he replied, chin lifted to steady himself. Friction with names attached is still people, I pressed me. He unzipped the backpack and pulled a sealed envelope. Last signature, he said, sliding it halfway toward me. I glanced at the header and read a withdrawal clause. Not signing releases, I said, pushing it back gently. His cheek twitched and the backpack strap creaked under strain. You could keep your narrative tidy, he muttered at the ground. I choose accurate, I said and lifted my phone. He flinched at the lens like it burned. You always escalate, he tried again, almost weary. I prioritize safety, I answered, and the wind cut the space. A chime surfaced from my pocket, bank alert pending. He watched my face as the numbers rolled across. Attempted transfer, I read, and let the silence expand. His gaze flicked to the backpack, then back to my hands. You planned this while walking up the stairs, I said. He set both palms on the bench and exhaled hard. No more accounts after tonight, he replied, eyes narrowed. You end that tonight with one sentence, I said. I held out the phone and opened the note app. Dictate and sign with your code right now. He stared at the keyboard and fought the impulse to argue. Then his mouth flattened and he started to speak. I authorize no further changes to Mara's property, he stated. He added time and date and tapped confirm after a beat. My screen flashed, locked by biometric consent, irrefutable and simple. I handed him a receipt for the keepsake and waited. He checked the line items slowly, like searching for traps. No more surprises, he said to the wind again. Then stop creating them, I replied, letting the words land. We stood there counting breaths while the city throbbed below. He reached into his jacket and pulled a ring of tags. These duplicates are gone after tonight, he announced, flat and final. Drop them now, I said, pointing to the drain grate. He hesitated a second, then let the tags clatter through. The sound echoed longer than it should have, deliberate and cold. Elena's text buzzed, police report number filed and linked. I tilted the screen so he could read the header. This is not revenge, I said, voice careful and steady. This is a record so you cannot rewrite me later. He swallowed and rubbed his wrist where a watch would sit. You win, he muttered, though nothing about this felt like winning. I keep what is mine, I answered, keeping my posture square. Maybe I was right about the noise, he added softly. No, I said, and the word held its own weight. You confuse accountability with static when it hits your plans. He lifted the backpack and studied my face for a crack. I will not text again, he said, tone almost curious. You will return anything you find later, I replied. Or someone else will collect it with a file number. He blinked twice and gave the smallest possible nod, compliance, not remorse. We walked to the door and paused at the threshold. He reached for the handle, then stopped like bracing. I told myself deletions are kindness, he admitted without looking. That story helped you sleep, I said, not unkind, just final. It does not work on me anymore, and it never will. He left by the stairs and his steps faded quickly. I stayed until the wind flattened the paper on the bench. Then I texted the group chat a short, clear line. I am safe, logistics resolved, no further contact requests. I pressed send and watched the read receipts blink like tiny eyes. Back home, I logged off the shared platforms for good. Alerts set, files mirrored, names corrected where they mattered. I closed my laptop and laid the recorder beside it. My hands steadied without effort, which surprised me a little. Maybe this is what power feels like when it finally fits. I wrote the final entry in the archive with slow care. Subject line simple, not deleted. Then I looked around and chose what to keep visible. One photo, 2 signatures, a timeline with sharp edges. If someone tries to erase me again, they will cut themselves first.